Today is a very important topic, and I know it's something that's front and center of a lot of landlords' minds right now. Should I sell or keep my buy-to-let property in 2023? Hiya and welcome to the channel. If you haven't been here before, I know for many of you it will be a first time because this topic is such a tricky one. Many landlords are thinking, should I sell? For those of you not in the sector, the reason that landlords might be considering selling is because their costs have gone up massively. And although we're seeing massive rent increases as well, quite often they don't keep the same pace as the mortgage payments. Therefore, there are many landlords that are actually finding that with the mortgage payments and the new tax regime since Section 24 was introduced, not allowing them to offset their full interest payments against tax, they find themselves in a situation where they're taking money from their private income in order to subsidize their buy-to-lets. And this is a bridge too far for most landlords who set out to do this in order to have this as an income and a protection for their family as opposed to a cost. Now, there are also many landlords that are in a position that have rented for many years. And this, in my experience, is the majority of landlords. They've had the same tenant for a number of years, and that tenant has been very good. And they've returned that respect by not increasing the rent. And that produces other problems of its own. So let's look at the pros and cons of selling or keeping your buy-to-let. To keep it, why would you keep it? Well, number one, it's one of the best inflation hedges that we've seen. I mean, if you look at the stock market, for instance, versus the rental market over the last year, you'll see that the rental market has flown and the stock market has gone backwards. This is not financial advice, by the way, but it's just our experience in light of the current market. A retirement income is another reason you might keep it. Many of our landlords now retired, have kept their property for many years and have found that their retirement income from their buy-to-let property is substantially higher than their pension and gives them the best supplement they possibly could have. A capital increase, and that is the value of the property itself, the asset is of itself, will go up over time. You know, they say buy land, they're not making it anymore. We're also not building enough houses anymore. If you add those two things together, it's obvious that over the medium to long term, property will always increase in value, or certainly that's always been the case in the history of the UK, particularly here in London and other major centres. Reasons to sell now, why you might wish to sell. Well, number one, it might be that your outgoings are now higher than your income. And it's understandable if you find yourself in that situation that you might need to sell and you really probably don't have a choice if those are your circumstances. The vilification of landlords is another one. The fact that it seems that politicians are always talking about rogue landlords. In my experience, the vast majority of landlords are not rogue at all. They're small landlords looking for a rental profit in order to look after their families, perhaps for school fees, perhaps to supplement their own income, or perhaps to look after themselves in retirement. But the fact that some are seen as the devil incarnate by certain people, and it seems that rogue landlords are mentioned at every juncture, is scaring some landlords out of the sector, not least because of the other legislation that is coming. We've got Section 24 already in place, meaning that landlords can only claim basic rate tax relief, which means that they're paying some taxes on money that they're never going to see because of the cost of the interest payments. The other thing is that as far as the legislation coming is concerned, we've got the requirement potentially coming up for a minimum Band C energy performance certificate. This was originally suggested for 2025. I don't think it's coming around anytime in 2025. I think it's going to be kicked into the long grass, but nonetheless, it's certainly a pain point on the horizon in the future. And then, of course, apart from that, we've got the increasing CGT, capital gains tax, which might mean that some landlords decide that it's better to sell up now rather than see that capital gains tax rise and rise. Some people think that it might even go further. Further acquisition, of course, is further hampered by the extra 3% duty that was put on some years ago now, meaning that it's quite expensive to acquire buy-to-let properties. So there are reasons why you might want to sell. The other thing is, depends how you hold it. If you hold it in a limited company, then of course you can offset more of your costs against the property. So therefore, things such as the full interest payments can be claimed. And it might be that a limited company is the route forward. Certainly, we're finding that the vast majority of new buy-to-let landlords are buying via special purpose vehicles, limited companies, and they're not as impacted by the section, well, they're in fact not impacted at all by the Section 24 rules of the private landlord. But for most small landlords, this is a problem. And then the question is, you know, they've got a relationship with their tenants. It's really awkward if they're selling. How do we sell? What do we do? Well, the first thing is most landlords are charging their tenants below market rate, which is all very admirable. But in fact, when you buy a property to rent out, it should be looked at as a business. Does that mean you should always increase the rents? No. You need to look at tenant circumstances. Individuals, you need to take each case on an individual basis. If your tenant's suffering particular financial hardship, as in particularly difficult circumstances, you may wish to continue as you are. If your tenant's earning income, perhaps multiple workers in the household, then you should be looking to increase your rent, certainly in line with inflation, below perhaps the current market rate. And what do you do? I mean, a big problem that landlords are finding is, what do you do if your rent is currently $1,000 and when you check online? And the way to do that, by the way, is to go to Rightmove, search for rental properties in your postcode, include ones that are let, and then have a look at what currently properties in your price range are getting, in your property's type and style are getting, and then decide whether you are due a rent increase. And chances are you probably are. Often, to give you a good example, your rent might be £1,000 per calendar month, but the new rent you'll find is now £1,500 per calendar month. If you like your tenants and want to keep them, then the way to do that is perhaps a compromise to split the difference and perhaps look at a balance of £1,250 as meeting them in the middle between the current rent and where they are right now. If you don't like your tenant or you're finding a particularly troublesome tenant, you probably want to increase it to the maximum level possible. If you're looking to sell the property, you probably want to increase the rent anyway. And the reason you want to increase the rent if you're looking to sell the property is that you're going to need the tenant to find somewhere else to go. And if your rent is substantially below the current market level, it's highly likely that they won't move out. If they take advice, what they'll find is that they're entitled to stay put until you evict them. This is a costly and time-consuming process that can take, depending on where you are in the UK, anywhere from 6 to 18 months. So you're better off building a relationship with a tenant, having a discussion with them if you're selling, perhaps even giving them an incentive to help you with things like viewings and an incentive to leave when required financially. This is quite often the case. And certainly you might wish to compromise on the rent whilst you're doing the viewings and make sure that they don't feel that your agent is treading all over them with their size 10s, coming in at inconvenient times, because they'll just push back against that. You need an agent that's going to be sensitive to the needs of the tenant, because a good tenant landlord cooperation is what's required for a sale, for sure. And if you don't get that, you won't get access. And if you don't get access, you won't get the best possible price, because without viewings, you can't get a sale. So the answer to the question, should you sell your buy-to-let in 2023, really does depend on your personal circumstances. If you're looking for the medium term, you've got to ask yourself, what will I do with the cash that I've achieved? Many landlords, in fact, the vast majority of landlords will come out with a cash sum. What would I do with that cash sum? Would I invest it elsewhere? Would it achieve the same level of yield and potential profit in the medium term? And if you see something or a vehicle or a reason why it might, then perhaps it's the time for you to sell. If you're just going to put it in the bank, then is that a good use of that money when you could have it in that buy-to-let property? That's the sort of thing you've got to consider and decide. And then finally, of course, you've got to look at the business case. What are you earning out of this? Is there enough in it to make sure you're not subsidizing it from your salary? Because if you are, then that's a good business case for actually getting rid. If you're finding that there is substantial profit there and you're looking to the future, perhaps looking for retirement, that could be a good reason to keep it. There's no one clear-cut answer for every landlord. It does really vary depending on you, your personal circumstances, and what stage you're at in life and what you want to do with that money. It might be that it's there for your children's school fees, in which case it might be wise to hold on to so you can get that income, if it's achieving a substantial income indeed. And it might be it's there for your retirement, and there aren't many things that are better from retirement. We don't think that property is the only thing you should have in retirement, but we certainly think it should be in there in the mix if you can afford to do it and if your mortgage allows. It also greatly hinges on whether you have a mortgage, because if you don't have a mortgage right now, you're seeing huge rental inflation and no increase in costs. And in those circumstances, you really are winning in the current rental market, if you will. I say that in inverted commas because, of course, we have to have spare a thought for the poor tenants out there who are struggling already financially with increased bills and everything else, like everybody else. But one has to look to protect one's own position first of all, and look at it and look at the business case for either keeping or selling the property. If you want more information or advice, or you'd like to comment on the video, we're always glad to receive your comments. And you can always drop me an email, ken@jamesalexander.com, for more info. So thanks for watching. Hope you found it helpful. Ciao.